It seems to take so very long to get everything together, to have the breakfast. Maybe you have your breakfast at home, or maybe you have your breakfast here in church, Al. And then there's a kind of rush to get through the bathroom, and then you get to church, and there are people to talk to, and finally the service begins. And maybe somehow we lose the sense of why we're here. So I'm going to invite you just to be quiet for a moment. To take a deep breath and then slowly release it. And we're here. We're here as the family of God in the presence of our Father. We're here to lift up our voices in praise to Him. We're here to receive from Him what He wants to say to us today. We're here to say thank you and to bring to Him the needs that we have and the people around us have. And we're here to be changed, so that at the end of this morning we go out from this place with more of the DNA of Jesus Christ in us, changed to be like Him wherever He takes us in this coming week. And to that end, loving Father, we hand this time into your care. Let it be delightful to you and life-changing for us. And may your kingdom grow because we have been together with you this day. Amen. First thing I said we'd do would be to lift up our voices in praise to God. Praise is rising. Let's stand and sing. I would come and be with you this morning. I asked if I could take an all-age service, because I love all-age services. The danger is that somehow the grown-ups feel that this is a children's service. Oh dear, how mistaken you are. It is an all-age service. So, youngsters, if you see that the grown-ups aren't playing their part, I want you lovingly to grasp them up for me, okay? I want you to point the finger and explain who we need to embrace in the course of our all-age service to make sure that this is everyone in God's family together. Now, we're going to be using our imaginations this morning, and just as a kind of warm-up exercise for that, I'm going to name something. And what I'd really like is for you just then to come back to me with the image that crops up in your mind at that point. Okay? It's very easy. It's very easy. Let's have a go with an easy one to start with. 1, 2, 3, cat. Dog. Feel the need to put the opposing position, do you mind? England fielders. Oh, okay, interesting. Why not slightly more on topic then? Cat. Cat. What appears in your mind when you think about a cat? Who said that? The cat in the hat. Okay. All right. You really are very imaginative, aren't you? I was thinking about pointed furry ears and a tail and whiskers and and that kind of thing. Okay? You're ahead of me in the imagination game this morning, okay? Let's try another one. 1, 2, 3, seaside. Beach. South End. Good one, I like that. The sea, the sand. Seagulls, I'm afraid so in Southend. Yes, you learn to respect them. What about things, seashells, things you can eat at the seaside? Fish and chips, ice cream, sand castles, not at Southend really, I'm afraid it's mud, but Punch and Judy. Oh, well, there we are, where it's done really well. Punch and Judy, okay. I'm afraid lots of people at times, though I think from this weekend on, the numbers of people on the beach will go down because everyone's going back to school. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. 1, 2, 3, hero. There's always a SWAT, isn't there? There's always a teacher's pet. Okay? Forget Gideon for the next 30 seconds. Hercules. What's remarkable about Hercules as a hero, Brian? Hey, yes. Okay? Let's have another thought. Hero. What are we thinking? Superman. Red boxer shorts, flying through the air. Yes? What else have we got about heroes? Batman, okay. Someone said courageous. I'm a little bit shocked that no one said yes. He's redeemed himself. Okay. Because our story this morning is indeed about a hero from the book of Judges, correctly prophesied by Mike as the story of Gideon. Very good, paying attention. And we're going to tell the story of Gideon in 2 parts. And there's going to be something quiz-like in the middle. And then we're going to bring it all together at the end. And I mention all of that for those of you who get easily bored, that you know how soon we get towards the tea and coffee right at the end. Okay? Very good. So, this way round. Yes, very good. So it's this one. Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you. I want you to come with me now to a place far, far away, in a time long, long ago. If you think back as far as you can, it was further ago than that. It was before Brian was a boy. God's people were living in the land that God had given them. And it was a land overflowing with milk and honey and wheat and all kinds of good things to eat. And you'd think that in a place like that, all people would have to do is just milk the cows and collect the honey from the bees and collect the wheat from the fields. And life would just be wonderful. And there was a time when it was like that. But at the time we're thinking of, God's people were hiding in caves. And the baskets that should have been full of bread were empty. And as they looked out from their caves, what could they see? But they saw in this land that God had given them, they saw their enemies, who were as thick on the ground as ants pouring out of an anthill. So many that you couldn't count them. And every time the crops grew, the enemies would come and they would steal the crops, and they would take the cattle, and they would take the honey, and it left God's people frightened, and it left them in the caves. And God's people wondered, where was God in all of this? Where was the God who called them his special people? And after a time, their fear became so strong that they cried out to God, "Lord, where have you gone?" And God sent one of his messengers who came and told them a really hard thing to hear. For the messenger told them, this is what God is saying to his people. I took you by the hand and I led you out of Egypt, out of slavery. I led you through the wilderness to a place which would be for you a land overflowing with milk and honey. And what I said to you then was that you should not worship the gods of the Amorites, gods of the Midianites, the gods of the Amalekites, the gods of the peoples whose land I'm giving you. If you stay true to me, life will be good. But if you desert me, you will find the good gifts that I've given to you will desert you. But God didn't leave it there. For God heard their cry, and he didn't just want to tell them off. But God sent one of his messengers to come and find a particular man. And his name was, Mike? Gideon. And Gideon, I'd love to tell you that Gideon was a hero. I'd love to tell you that Gideon was like Hercules, strong, or like Superman, flying through the air, or like Batman, a fighter against baddies. But where did God's angel find Gideon? He found Gideon hiding away in a place where they squeeze the grapes to make wine. And he was hiding there because that's where he was turning the wheat into flour to make bread. And he knew that if he did it in the open, the Midianites, the baddies, would turn up and steal all their food. And so he was doing it hiding away. But he was also hiding away because, and I'm going to use a very special biblical theological term here, he was a scaredy cat. Okay? You think about Gideon, I'd want to say, yes, Gideon. But actually it was more like this with Gideon. It was more like this. And suddenly, hiding away where he thought no one else knew where he was, God's angel stood there in front of him and said, "Hey, Gideon, you mighty man of courage." "You what?" says Gideon. I translate into a kind of Ilford dialect at that point. Okay? "You what?" "Me." "You," said God's messenger. "For God has chosen you to go out in your strength, but with him to chase the Midianites out of this land, to lead the people back to God." "You've got to be kidding," said Gideon. "Look at me." And he held up his arm like that, and his bicep, such as it was, like a pencil. "I'm a weakling. I'm the weakest in all my family and in all my tribe. There is nobody who doesn't look at me and say, that is Gideon, the weakling." Ah, said God's angel. But God will be with you. All right, said Gideon. You're obviously an angel. You're saying things to me. I need to ask for a bit of proof. So please, just wait here for a moment while I go out and I cook a curried goat and some flatbreads. And please just promise me that you won't go until I come back with them. Now, some of you know how to cook curried goat, don't you? You know that it isn't hurried. And actually, when you look at the flatbread that Gideon baked, remember, flour is scarce. He used an ephah of flour. Ruth, he used a whole ephah. Okay, when was the last time you cooked a flatbread with a whole ephah of flour? Well, an ephah is 22 litres of flour. In other words, the flour was scarce, but Gideon wanted to test whether this was truly God speaking to him. Can you imagine a flatbread made with 22 litres of flour? It would have been big. And there was the curried goat, and he brought it back, and the stranger was still there. And the stranger said, put it on the rock over there and pour some gravy on top until this wonderful, savoury smell wafted through the place. And then the stranger reached out with his stick, or her stick, we don't know, and touched the food with the stick, and bang! It was all gone in a flash of fire, as a sign that God was there and had received Gideon's offering. And Gideon had one of those, oh, here we are, you're ahead of me, one of those aha moments that God was there with him. But you know, he didn't get the chance at that point just to rest back and do nothing. He didn't just treasure a bit of knowledge, he had to put it into action. I think sometimes when we have encounters with God, we like to squirrel it away, don't we? We like to hoard it as though it doesn't affect what happens in the day-to-day. And straight away, God's angel said to Gideon, Gideon, now you need to go out and find the altars to the god Baal and the pole that is dedicated to the goddess Asherah that are in your father's village. You need to chop them down. You need to use the wood from those to build a new altar, which is to the one true God. You need to go and get the second best bull in your father's herd, and you need to kill the bull and make a wonderful offering to God on that altar. And Gideon, strong man, no, scaredy cat, did what he was told. But he didn't do it in the daytime, where people could see him. He didn't do it first thing in the morning, where people might wake up and find out what was happening. He took his servants and friends, and he did that at night. They chopped down the altar to Baal, they chopped down the altar to Asherah, and they built an altar to the one true God, and they put a bull on it, and they made a sacrifice of it. The next morning, people in the village woke up, and they came looking around and said, "Who has done this? Who has chopped down the altar of Baal? Who has chopped down the Asherah pole?" And somebody let it leak that it was Gideon who did that. And they said to Gideon's father, "Bring him out, we're going to duff him over." Actually, they said something a bit stronger than that, but there are young ears present, okay? So we're protecting those. And they wanted to have it out with Gideon there and then. But Gideon's father wouldn't let them. And from that day on, they gave Gideon a nickname. They gave him the nickname Jerubbaal, which means he's picked a fight with Baal. Now, the angel said one more thing before disappearing. The angel said, "Get a trumpet and call all of your people to come and fight the Midianites, the baddies." And once again, Gideon gave the trumpet call, but he was like this. He was scared. I don't blame him, because the Midianites were like ants from an ant's nest all over the place, so many of them. And Gideon said, I need to ask God another test. I'm going to take this sheepskin, that's a sheepskin there. I'm going to take this sheepskin and I'm going to put it down on the floor in this place. And if when I wake up in the morning the ground is dry, but the sheepskin is drenched with dew, I will know that God is there fighting with us. And he went to bed that night, and when he woke up in the morning, he took hold of that sheepskin and he squeezed it, and out came a whole bowl of water, which spilled out onto the dry ground around it. Do you think he was satisfied? He wasn't. He said, look, I'm sorry, I have to ask for another test. This time, tonight, I want to put the fleece out on the ground, and I want the fleece to be dry, the sheepskin to be dry, but the ground to be wet. And the angel said, yeah, okay, we can do that. And when he woke up the next morning, that's exactly how it was. I'm going to suggest that you just spend now 2 or 3 minutes talking to the people around about you in twos and threes and asking, does Gideon seem like a hero? That's a pretty easy question. What do I see of myself in Gideon? And have I ever asked God to prove who he is? These questions rise in order of seriousness. Okay, so let's just turn to one another. Whoever you are, you may know the people you're with or not, that doesn't matter. We're not going to collect in homework. This is just asking questions of the story. Very briefly, to say how good it is to be back here and to see so many friends that we remember with affection, and some new faces as well, which is great. And we're going to be, Nikki and I are going to be sticking around after the service for tea and coffee and to catch up with all of you. And you can ask us lots of questions then about what's happening with us, but very simply, right now, a year ago, we felt that it was right that I should stand down from the pastorate at Church from Scratch in Southend, which we did in May this year. Church gave us an amazing send-off. And we did that because the time was right for that to happen. And we can unbutton that a little bit for you over coffee. There were no arguments, there was no crisis, no disagreements, nobody got cross. Things were going really well, and indeed, since we left, the church has had 3 baptisms for which we rejoice. And we continue to live in Southend, and I'm doing bits and pieces, much less, let me tell you, bits and pieces of ministry work around, and I'm trying not to watch daytime television. You know, Viv, how hard that is. Yeah? But catch up with us over tea and coffee, and we will tell you a little bit more. Now, Gideon, in our story, he was a complete unknown, and we're going to look at 12, very briefly, 12 people who were unknown when they were younger, or unknown in the sense that they grew up to be, before they were famous. And so we'll pop up. Okay, so Team A, over here. All right. Team B, over here. And you've got 6 each. Let's see how many we can get. Team A, who is that? Rio. Have you looked at this PowerPoint before today? It's the mouth. It's the mouth. Okay, this is Rio Ferdinand, the footballer and pundit. And so would you keep your own score? That is 1 point for Team A. You're in the lead. Okay, and we now move on to Team B. And this is? It is Beyonce. Very well done. I can see you're very good at this. 1 point for you. Okay, you're going to keep your own scores. All right. Team A. Not so easy this time. Not so easy. Okay, imagine a hero with a torn and dirty vest. Okay, he's been in 5 movies of the same franchise. Bruce Willis, it is. Well done. Okay, Bruce Willis. Much younger there. How many points have you got? 5. 2. So I just thought we get 3 for that. Watch that man. Okay, Team B, your go. George and Mrs. King. Mrs. King, I would have thought you would have got that one, seeing as you did. Something of a heartthrob, I feel. Yes. Very good. Okay, well done, George Clooney. So 2 points all. Let's go back. Team A. Okay, Team A.
Can we have a clue?
It is Theresa May. Well done. Bit of a heartthrob for you, Al. All right, keep your score, and we move on now. Too young. Give you a clue. I can't. Oh, okay. I'll give you a clue. It is Donald Trump. Wasn't he a little angel then? Okay, back to Team A. Now this one may shock you, so be prepared. It is Eminem. Well done. For Gina's benefit, Eminem is a popular rap artist. Okay, keeping your scores. We move on over here. Winston Churchill. Yes, as a young man. How often would you find Winston Churchill and Beyonce in the same set of photographs, eh? Okay, I think we're even so far, aren't we? Matched, evenly matched. Well done. Okay, Team A. I think you mean Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, don't you? As she later became. It is Meghan Markle as a young girl. Well done. You're very good at this. Team B. Brad Pitt. And here's something you didn't know, that when they eventually filmed the Cranbrook story, and they're covering the Ivan King years, yes, absolutely. Pay attention now. Very good. Tough one over here. Heartthrob for ladies of a certain age, gentlemen of a certain age, I should say.
Is that a lady?
It is a lady. Well, it's a woman. Yes, she's a lady as well.
Okay. Can we have a clue?
A clue. Okay, she's no antique.
She's what?
She's no antique.
Someone who does the Antiques Roadshow.
She is Fiona from the Antiques Roadshow, who is known as Fiona Bruce. And then a nice, easy one for Team B. Okay, that is Sir Paul McCartney. Okay, very briefly, what do they all have in common?
They're people.
What do they all have in common?
They're people. They're people.
They are people. Okay, what they all had in common is they did not start out as they later became. Some of them had to leave behind old stuff, and all of them needed to acquire some new skills and calling. And I just wonder, as we think about this week coming up, as some people are going to be changing schools, some people are going to go back to school, teachers are going to go back to school. Maybe people in your family are going off to university or finding a new job. I wonder, actually, if you ever think what you might become. What you might become with help from God. Let's carry on. We're going to skip a song for those who are looking at the running order for today. We're going to skip a song so that we finish around an hour after we started, and we're going to hit the highlights of the story of Gideon. What has happened so far in 3 contributions? What's happened first of all?
He met an angel,
He met an angel.
and his offering was consumed by fire.
Yes. Okay, very well done. Yes.
He got the skin of a sheep and then he put on the ground, and then to test if God was there.
Yes, you were listening. Well done. Anything else that we learned from today? He was afraid. Okay. And we left Gideon having called his army together. This is the big weakling. This is the guy nobody listens to. Everyone laughs at. He sent out a trumpet call, and he called together the people, not only from his family, the Abiezrites, but from his tribe of Manasseh. But they weren't the only ones who turned up. Also turning up were fighters from the tribes of Naphtali and Asher. 32,000 of them. Oh, come on. 32,000 of them. A mighty army that God could use to kick the baddies out of the country. Except that God said to Gideon, too many. You got too many. Well, I'd feel quite comfortable in a way. I've never had to lead an army of 32,000. Who knows what life holds in store for me? But if God said to me, that's too many, I might become a little bit like Gideon and go like that. So God said to Gideon, if any of them tremble with fear at the thought of fighting, tell them they're allowed to go home. And 22,000 went home, leaving 10,000. Well done. 10,000 that were left. And God said to Gideon, you got 10,000? It's still too many. So I want you to get all of your soldiers to walk in front of you, and I'll tell you which ones you're going to keep and which ones you're going to send home. And Gideon was told to watch them as they all drank. And those that got down on their knee, I can't really demonstrate this because you wouldn't see it and I haven't got any water and it would look very silly. But if you can just imagine that those who got down on their knees and drank water straight from the stream like dogs, God said, send them home. But those who gather water up in their hands and drink it from their hands, keep them in your army. 9,700 went home, leaving 300. 300 soldiers who had picked up the water in their hand and drunk it like that. With these, said God, you will defeat the Midianites. Now Picture yourself as Gideon at this point. Put yourself in Gideon's shoes. How are you feeling? Not good. A little bit like that. Wishing you could have been part of the 22,000 who were allowed to go home. Yes? Because you're a scaredy cat. But actually, I am a lot of the time. And unless you are superhuman, most of you will be also. God said to Gideon, go, dress up, and go and listen in the enemy camp, and I will tell you what will happen. And so Gideon took with him his servant, and they snuck down into the enemy camp, and they hid behind a rock, and they looked out, and there were so many camels that you couldn't count. Now, okay, so many camels. Why camels? Camels were a sign of the strength of the Midianite army. And they looked out, and there were too many to count. But as they hid behind a rock, they earwigged a conversation that was taking place between some of the soldiers that were there. And one of them said, I had a dream last night, and the dream was that this big barley loaf was going to roll into our camp and knock down all the tents. Oh, well, you know what that means, said his friend. That means that Gideon, helped by God, is going to knock us all over. And when you read the story in the Bible, you read that Gideon worshipped God at that point. And he went back and he took his 300 troops and he divided them into 3 groups of 100 each, and he gave them trumpets, and trumpets may have been made of ram's horn or may have been trumpets. He gave them some empty jars, he gave them torches, and made sure they all had swords. Okay? And then he said to them, when I give you the signal, we will surround the Midianite camp. And at the signal from me, I want you to blow your trumpets. I want you to smash your jars. I want the fire from the torches to blaze up. And then all of us will shout aloud, for God and for Gideon. Now we're going to try that. So, yeah. So, this lot over here, I want you to make a sound like a trumpet. Okay? We'll try it in a moment, but I'm just giving you a moment to mentally prepare. And over here, I want this lot to make a sound like a smashed jar. Okay? I know, but we've used our imaginations today. And over here, I want this lot to make it sound like fire starting up. Okay? We'll try it, shall we? And then all together at the end, we'll say, for God and for Gideon. So we'll try it over here first of all. So, trumpets. Trumpets. Okay, God has to be with you because on your own. And then the smashing of jars. Ah, very good. And then fire leaping up. And then all together, for God and for Gideon. Okay, we haven't got to that bit in the story yet, so we're just going to come to it now. All right? So they gathered round the outside of the Midianite camp, and it was completely dark and very quiet. And then Gideon gave the signal, and the trumpet sounded. And the soldiers smashed their jars. And the fires sprang up. And they all shouted, for God and for Gideon. And inside the camp, everyone went wild. They were running around and not knowing what was happening because it was dark and they heard all this noise and suddenly there was fire all around them. And they picked up their swords and they started hurting each other. And then eventually they found their way out of the camp, and this mighty Midianite army ran away. Thousands upon thousands, defeated by God with 300 people. After a while, they brought to Gideon the leaders of the Midianites who were called Oreb and Zeb. I don't know how they could have hoped to win with names like Oreb and Zeb. I'd like to tell you what happened then, but once again, the grown-ups would be very cross with me if I explained exactly what happened. But they met a bit of a sticky end, okay? That's enough said. They did die, okay. But don't say any more because you'll frighten some people, okay? Oreb and Zeb died. It doesn't matter where you start from. Some of you have had a rocky start in life. It doesn't matter that you feel weak or that you lack confidence. It isn't important that you have numbers of people with you or that you feel strong and secure. What matters is when you place yourself in God's hands and trust that He will do what is required. Once again, in your pews, you've got those little cutouts. If they're useful to you, fantastic. Maybe you want to just write down something from today, one word, or draw a little picture, or somebody who's come to mind as we've been thinking today, that God might want to help in that way, or He might want to help you. Let's just take a moment or two. If you want to jot something down, there are plenty of spares of the cutouts here at the front. Maybe you just want to pray and allow the story to speak to you. Let's be quiet for a moment. Loving Lord, thank you for that story, which has been retold over millennia. Because at its heart there is someone just like us, someone who isn't important, who isn't famous, someone who gets easily scared, someone who feels weak. Thank you that that story continues to speak to us of how change is possible in the most unlikely circumstances. And we who have gathered here today because of you, aware of our own great need, ask that you yourself will come and live within us again. That you will change us. And that what we will be delightful to you. And we'll see good things happen because we trust you and rely upon you. We thank you for Gideon. We thank you for one another. Amen. Very good. We started with praise and lifting up God's name. We're going to do that again. We want to see Jesus.